All right. Hello and welcome to Heart as a Compass Zoom interview series. My name is Paige Lucier Johnson and I am your host. Today's special guest is Juli Gauthier, who is a very important person in my life, and I'm getting a little choked up because she's a mentor of mine. I met you about right before COVID, right around that world, and my life has completely transitioned since you have come into my life. My first ever official life coach session was with you, working on abundance and manifesting, things that I thought that I had in the bag, that I was still struggling in those same little corners that I was punching bag with. And in one call, Juli and I worked together, and we were laughing and talking and crying and all the emotions. And since then, I've got my L-shaped sofa, which is my big homework. Juli was like, you need to manifest that. What is the one thing you want? And I was like, I want an L-shaped sofa. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have it. It's being delivered August 9th. So now the next thing is we just want the Red Sox to win the World Series. So that way it is free, because there was a promotion with the store. Funny story. Juli has an amazing connection to me in so many ways. My people tend to be teachers and artists and healers. Juli is all three. And over the last couple of years, we've been finding more and more synchronicities and connections with each other. For my people that follow me a lot, she has a wonderful homeschool connection and really started building her entrepreneurship as a homeschool mom. So whoop, whoop to the homeschool moms out there. She's also an artist and an amazing healer. So with no further ado, on Heart as a Compass Radio, we like to find out about how you use your heart as a compass. And if you would be so honored to tell us your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. When you asked, I got super excited. It was, speaking of manifestation, that day I was like, you know what? It's time. It's time for me to go back and talk after all this stuff that's been going on in the world. And like almost immediately it came through from you. And I'm like, of course, that's where it would come from. That makes so much sense. So thank you again for having me. So my story, wow. Because this actually puts all the different pieces together. So you like, I have a homeschooling story, and I have a woo story, and a healing story, and all that stuff. I'll start with the homeschooling first, because you mentioned that, and it kind of evolves into that. I am so old that when I started homeschooling, it was borderline legal. And in the magazines, it would talk about what to do if someone showed up at your door to arrest you for homeschooling. Now, so this is early 2000s. And I homeschooled for 15 years. I have 3 kids, and I homeschooled 2 other kids besides my own. One of them only went to kindergarten. I homeschooled him the whole time. My middle daughter is the reason I started. She was a figure skater, and she was getting, I'm sure you guys all understand this stuff, she was getting so much homework at night that she couldn't actually go and skate. And either it was way too easy, or I ended up teaching her the stuff anyway, because they didn't either they didn't teach it in school or didn't get through to her, one way or the other. So she came up to me in Target with a book and said, Tara Lipinski homeschooled mom, I want to homeschool. And I'm like, yeah, right. And it's so funny because the oldest one had asked me to homeschool her like 5 years before that. So this was not a new concept in our family, but I was like, yeah, right. Because I had a baby at that point too, because my kids are far apart in age. So I bought the book, at least took it home. And, you know, in the way of we do when we are really going to get woo later, but are kind of already doing it, but not realizing it. I'm like, send me a sign. I'd love a sign. If I'm supposed to be doing this, send me a sign. Like a week later, she was at the playground, and 2 sets of kids were tugging on her, and they pulled her arm or shoulder out of the socket. And they sent her to the nurse. The nurse gave her ice, but they never called me. And I was home, landline days, so it's not like cell phone, but I was home with the baby all day. If the phone had rung, I would have been there. And her dad is a chiropractor, so it's not like we couldn't have gotten her medical care immediately, and they knew this. So I pick her up from school, and her one arm is 6 inches lower than the other. Her hand is blue. And in that moment, I was like, they don't know more than I do. I really can do this. And it was like this, I can do this. I can do this. This is the sign I was waiting for. I can do this. So we let her finish out the school year, which was like 3 more weeks. And we started homeschooling that fall with her. And we started with deschooling to get the school system out, because then I read all the books. I read like 50 books in 3 years on everything I could come up with: homeschooling, child development, personal development. Like my favorite book in terms of homeschooling was 7 Habits for the Highly Effective Family.
Yeah.
So, which is still effective today. Like if you want to figure out how to homeschool, start there and then go for whatever method you're going to use. And so that started us on our journey. And then that fall, we pulled the older one out. She hated school, didn't want to go to school. I wanted to homeschool her. She said she didn't want to go. And I'm like, okay, I'll let you decide if you're going to school every day. And if you get to the point where they say you're going to flunk because you haven't gone to school enough, I'm pulling you out. We're homeschooling. So that happened in November. So, okay, great. We're homeschooling you too. She was in middle school at that point. So it was a good transition for her. And then the little one hadn't even started yet. We sent him to kindergarten, which probably was a mistake because I wanted him to see what school is like so that he can decide. Every year we decided, I'd ask the kids, do you want to go back to school or do you want to homeschool? And so I thought I'll give him an example. And he thought like 4th grade would be getting like kindergarten. I'm like, no. And then his sisters are like, no, it's not, you're not going to be looking for gingerbread men in 4th grade. So it was a beautiful journey. And I did a lot of unschooling. We're in an area, the fire chief's wife is the head or was the head of LSDLA, the legal defense for homeschoolers.
Okay.
Whatever that was. You know what
Yep, I know what you mean.
So my baby's 25, so it's been a while. It's been a while. It lives in this town. So we could go out after like maybe 5 years, we knew we could go out for lunch with all the kids. We could have recess at the park. My 11-year-old boy could go play with the daycare that used to go to the park across the street every day at the same time. That was his recess or whatever. And we wouldn't have any problems. And then my husband, he had a bunch of cops as patients. So that helped too. They were always keeping an eye out, driving by just to make sure he was okay, which is so wonderful. Right. And it just went from there, for those of you in the middle of the journey, here's how we handled college. 1, we wrote a 50-page report of everything that she did, which was very cool. That one was the figure skater. She went to all 7 continents and fundraised most of it on herself by the time she was 18. Antarctica was a science trip. And so her science that year was going to Antarctica for 3 weeks. She had a really cool experience. I got a full ride to a school in Portland. And okay, if you do the private schools, they'll give you money for homeschoolers because they're self-starters. And in this age and the things that I'm hearing from my family members who are teachers, the self-starter thing is even more important. So all of you are homeschooling. If you want your kids to go to college, know that the high schools, the public colleges are going to want documentation. So they're going to want the GED and all that other stuff. And they're not going to appreciate the fact that you didn't play the state game. So don't disqualify this thing they're homeschooling. So therefore it's not, you've got to follow the rules and I signed my kids' diplomas and they're all fine. And one of them is a teacher and they're all fine. I mean, she did the system. And then the middle one, she does fundraising for nonprofit organizations. And then my youngest son, who is the most interesting of the 3, he was profoundly dyslexic, didn't read till he was 11. And Dr. Raymond Moore talks about that and how boys are later to develop. So we worked really hard at okay, we're not going to push it because it'll actually do damage to his eyes. So we're just going to back off. And Wagon was the way to record now. And now you can just do it on your phone. So he was writing papers, but he was doing it through the computer. He participated in his older sister's high school classes when he was a young kid. He was waking me up in the morning and telling me about black holes that he watched some show on National Geographic at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't understand it, and I'm not stupid. So I'm like, okay, we got this. This is good. This is going good. And we sent him to Tony Robbins when he was 15 or 16. He came home and he's like, Mom, I know what I want to do when I grow up. I want to work with supercars and I want to do all these things. And you know what? It would be really cool if I could help guys set up their supercars because I'll know all the little details and everything and all this other stuff. And at that point, he got on one of his posts, 200,000 followers and the whole 9 yards. He was really big into this.
Mhm.
And he got a speeding ticket in my Mini. And, it's like, well, maybe you're not ready, and we had a 1966 GT40 that was manual. So in my Mini's manual. So he learned how to manipulate these cars.
Yep.
And 2 years ago, right when the pandemic started, he would follow these cars around and ask these guys in high school, what did you do? How did you get to where you're at? How did you get there? Right. So he made a lot of ins in this community. So this guy he had 6 cars in his collection at this point that he was looking for a manager for his car collection. And a bunch of people referred to him. And he's like, well, everybody's giving me your name. And this isn't a group with like a lot of people, but we lived right down the road from him. It was perfect placement. Goes for an interview. And the guy says, I don't hire anybody. And wait at least 24 hours. So you might hear something from me tomorrow. He ended up being the only one he interviewed. He hired him 2 hours later. He started that night. He's now on year 2 of this job, and he manages like a 30 car collection. They're building this warehouse with 40 where they'll have visiting days. They're driven to give back is their motto. So they have like 5 of these cars, the only ones in the Midwest. So he really has his hands daily. He's in charge of taking care of these cars and going, and they have a YouTube channel with 150,000 followers, and like people recognize him in public. It worked. So you let your kids do what they love, it'll happen. And that's
using your heart as a compass. He found a passion.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it worked. It worked like everything is just working out for him. And he just went to, like, we tease him. He just went to kindergarten, but he just bought his first house. He's 25. He's getting married in the fall. He proposed to his fiance in a hot air balloon. Like he's like making it all happen because he's following his heart.
And I just need to interject. You've talked about creating your business line is the Enchanted Life. And I'm hearing from you proof that you know how to create an enchanted life, like what that formula is and what that means. I mean, I remember working with you and the way that you look. I mean, I've been following law of attraction before anyone knew what this was. And I'm like, why don't I have it mastered yet? It's so frustrating. And yet, like in one coaching call with you, it's that I was, controlling. I was, not quite opening up to it. And I love how you've taken, a lot of times for me personally, it's been a struggle being a mom and being an entrepreneur and being an artist and all of these different things that feel like they're so separated. And I love how you're like, no, they can all be connected. And I think that that's what an enchanted life about is like when you use your heart as a compass and you say yes to these things. I mean, the story, let's just highlight that. Your children traveled the world while they were homeschooling. That's amazing. And then that your son, it sounds like all of your kids are doing great and your son's wonderful story. I love that. But I want to know a little bit more about your story too, because as a healer, my other group of followers are, definitely people that are on the spiritual path or, kind of starting up and awakening to it. And you have such a beautiful story of your spiritual awakening. Could you share that for my listeners, please?
Sure. Okay. So the other side of me, which, intertwines, right? So I have something called synesthesia. That's the first outcropping or really obvious thing that I have going on that I've had as long as I can remember. And there are like 89 types of this. It is the crossing of senses. So for me, the loudest one or the most obvious one or the one that is a very present and almost interferes with my life if I let it is I see sound. So every time any noise is going on, I see something in this area here in terms of colors. I feel sensations in the back of my eyeballs. Sometimes I'll get a taste in my mouth. There's that. I've got to see energy because I can see electrical current in the walls at times. I put my hand in water. I can see the temperature of the water. I see energy around stones. When I was a kid, they were all different colors, all sorts of things. So when I was little, I had a couple interesting things. My imaginary friend was one of my past lives. And I knew it at the time. And then I had people convince me it wasn't. And then I got older. And I'm like, oh, of course it was. And so are these other ones. That this one I met when I was 18 months old on a beach in this big American Indian shaman. As I'm putting my hand underwater, my mom goes, don't, that's dirty. And I was going to collect shells. And he came through and he just was very upset. It's like, how could anything so beautiful and natural be dirty? Like I felt this like adult, deep man, like sadness. And at 18 months old, and I knew he was there, and he's always there, and I can just call on him. And sometimes he's more dormant, but he's always there. And then this 4-year-old who lived under a food cart in the Middle Ages, who had an awful life, and sometimes he was pulled away and beaten and whatever, but sometimes he'd come back and play. So much so my cousin remembers him. Like I played with him so often. And like these rocks that would glow and trees would glow and the whole 9 yards, until a friend told me, like, no, all those rocks are white. And I'm like, oh, they are all white. And then it all kind of went away. But all through this, and we would play tag, and they blindfold me. I always knew where people were. And they would always play games where they would stand in the street, and I had to ride my bike around them blindfolded, and I could do it every single time because I could see their energy. And they're like, oh, you're cheating. You can see that. My favorite game is flashlight tag because I knew everybody was, even though it was dark out. Anyway, but I didn't realize at that point I was different until I was about 18 years old. I was in music theory class, and we were in a group writing music, and I was making chords with colored pencils, not on sheet music. And I showed it to the group, and they're like, what is that? And I'm like, this is the chord progression. What are you talking about? And they showed the teacher, and the teacher's like, oh, that's synesthesia. No wonder you present as being like perfect pitch. Because a C is like this yellow orange. All I had to do was sing the yellow orange. And I knew that if I matched the color, it was the right pitch. So, which then makes me wonder, like, our musicians, there are a lot of synesthete musicians, are the perfect pitch ones. Do they have some form of synesthesia? So I go home. He goes, oh, it's hereditary. You should ask your parents about this. I go home, mention to my dad, and he goes, oh, your grandmother had that. She drank herself to death because of it and was locked up in an institution because of all this. And I was like, oh shit, this is not a good thing. And because I knew stories about her. She died before I was born, and there were stories about her, right? She was the crazy one. It's like, oh, now I'm crazy too. That's great. So I squished this and squished this. I went through a little bit of a phase of exploring it, and I was drawing auras, didn't know what I was doing, and as party tricks for my friends in college. But I really, really started to really squish this down. In about 35, I noticed all my senses were going. It wasn't just that. I couldn't keep my contacts updated enough to be able to see. I stopped being able to hear things. I couldn't taste or smell. I remember eating really hot foods. I hate hot foods. Isn't this funny? I stopped being able to feel touch on my arm. And I thought it was funny. I thought it was a joke. And fortunately, in our clinic, we had hired a new doctor, and I was teaching him our bedside manner stuff. So I was his first patient in terms of teaching him how we do things in the room and write up paperwork and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I got this weird thing going on. My senses keep cutting out. Like, I'll drive the car and not know where I am and not be able to see the road. I don't understand what's going on. And that's kind of starting to worry me because, well, if you're driving a car, you don't know what's going on. That's not a good thing. And he kind of came up with this whole synesthesia thing. And he's like, you're pushing it away so much that all the other senses are going to. So you got to open this up. So in a matter of a week or two, I was able to relax enough. My eyes settled down. I could hear again. My taste and smell came back, and the colors came back, but it was a learning disability. Now, synesthesia is actually considered by the medical community a learning disability. So I was taught how to use sound canceling headphones to manage my disability. But all my senses were back, right? So I'm now managing this stuff, but I'm still like talking to my past life guides, even though in my uber Christian neighborhood, which is why we homeschool so much in this area, not the reason I was homeschooling so much, but why they were homeschooling everything everywhere. Like talking about the moon phases and what that does to us may not be something that's accepted. So I'm hiding my moon books and my crystals and all these things I'm collecting. And the fact that I'm seeing auras around people and all these other things that aren't real, right? So I'm like at this point 50. Yes, I'm older. Obviously, if my youngest is 25. Anyway, so I'm 50. I'm at this event with a coach,
Mhm.
and she could. I was reaching this point of, and maybe you guys have gone through this or may go through this, where I was shaking all the time and I couldn't stop it because the stuff wanted out and I wasn't
Mhm.
letting it out. And I didn't know how to, I didn't know I wasn't letting it out. I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff and I couldn't get to the other side. And I just knew I kept trying to build a bridge. I would try and fly, like I was trying to do all the things. And I
Mhm.
couldn't get to the other side and get across this chasm. And it was like literally shaking all the time. And it was, the flashes of light were overwhelming, like the whole 9 yards. It was a lot. And she brings me on stage and she thinks she's dealing with one thing. And then she comes up with this other thing. It's like, so what is really bothering you? And she was a therapist before she became a coach. So she kind of knew, she was like going in that direction.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, my grandmother was crazy, all this other stuff. And she kind of drew it out of me. And so in front of the whole room and everyone on camera, which was like 800 people, I kind of told everybody and kind of came out. And what
Mhm.
was awesome is everybody was really interested and they started talking to me, and I wasn't shunned like I was expecting to be in my home community or from my family of origin. And the cool thing was I brought it into my coaching. Like, okay, so get this. I go and she's like, you need to make a decision. What's going on here is you need to make a decision. It's like, I don't know how to stop this. It's like, yes, you do. You just need to make a decision. And I have all this Tony Robbins training, and she'd had Tony Robbins training too. So she knew exactly what she was telling me to do. It was doing his process. So I
Mhm.
went back to the room. We were in Dubai at this point. So of course I wasn't sleeping through the night because they're 12 hours off, right? It's the middle of the night and I'm cry for a good 3 to 4 hours, because you just do that to release all this stuff. And I'm
Yep.
like, okay, I'm gonna make the decision. And so I remembered the key to making a decision like this is, when have you made a decision like this before? And I remembered learning how to homeschool, or deciding to homeschool the kids. It's like
Yeah.
in that moment, I knew that's what needed to happen. Okay, so that's how do I feel that way? How do I get the feeling? And I'm like, I was at this Tony Robbins event in Fiji, and he had us jump off this bridge at night into this tidal bore that was coming in, where he told us all day there were snakes that were poisonous and sharks down there. And it was like a 40-foot drop. It was only 20, and these snakes were sleeping. And in the past, I would have been the last one off the bridge, and I was the second one off the bridge. And
Oh.
when I jumped, I knew I was ready, and there was freedom in that fall. And I'm like, okay, so that's the sensation I need to have. So I went to this wall. I kept saying, I felt like I'm standing behind a wall, and then there's this chasm. I climbed over the wall in my head and jumped off. And in that falling sensation, I heard a snap. And that was the decision. I let go. I let it loose. And I knew when I got up in the morning and everything was lit up again,
Yeah.
the colors in the shower were back. Like I
Oh.
could tell the difference in temperature from the top to the bottom of the water. And I'm like, I haven't seen that since I was 5. I forgot that even existed. And then I go down into the room, and everybody in the room has this big coppery, glittery ball in front of them. And I knew in that moment it was their soul. And it's just sitting there ready and waiting to work with. And so I
Mhm.
talked about this, and all of a sudden I got 60 sessions in like 2 months on how to play with this and bring it into my coaching
Mhm.
and experiment with, like, okay, how do we integrate the soul and bring it in and really be your true self? And all of a sudden it changed my coaching business. I was a business coach and a homeschooling coach before that. All of a sudden I
Mhm.
was an energy healer, and we're just going for the good stuff.
Right.
And
Mm.
it has just grown and grown and grown since there. It's just a matter of opening up and accepting it and knowing it isn't a problem. It isn't a disability. It isn't something to be shunned for. And now we've gone through enough. In the last 5 years, even, I can see the changes where
Mhm.
it's more accepted. And I think our pocket of Christianity is pretty narrow. I don't think that the country is quite as tight as, as soon as I moved one town over, everybody was really accepting. Oh, really? Can I get a session? Instead of like, oh, you should come to my
Mhm.
church, you know? And, and, and I can still be involved in my religious beliefs and be all this, and it's all good. And I feel beautiful and wonderful. So that's another thing. If you've got that holding you back, there's more options out there than that.
What I love about what you're saying is that it's the totality of who you are. and who you're meant to be. You're meant to be all these things. All these things were meant to happen to you. And
Mhm.
so often, I'm guilty, we put parts of ourselves in little tiny pegs and we don't let them move, right? And it's what I'm hearing from you is that when you jumped off that bridge, when you jumped into the chasm, it was like you took all those parts of you and they floated out and became stars. That's kind of the image that I got.
Mhm.
It was, instead of being in these little square pegs, it's that it's just who you are. You can expand, and I can feel it when you're talking. There was this kind of expansion, which is beautiful. I want to ask you, as a mom,
Mhm.
one thing that's important to me is honoring my children's journey. And I think that anyone who is homeschooling has that vibe in their soul, where there's something in them where they want more for their children. They want their children to be their children. They want them to be their own person, their own soul, their own being. And I know that my children are, younger now, but I've seen them with their gifts, and I've seen them, kind of, take in the things in the world. And how do you raise children in this world that is so complex, where they try to diagnose psychic gifts as learning disorders, when we have these golden children, these beautiful children that are here to teach us lessons? How do we really teach them? How do we embrace that for the next generation?
Okay. It's almost like we've got two worlds going on right now. And one is the very 3D world.
Mm-hmm.
And it is under scrutiny. It's falling apart. All of our structures are falling apart. Our school system, our medical care, our governmental system, all of our systems are falling apart. And that's okay. Okay. So another through line is I was a history major in college, and part of that had to do, well, I had 9 majors, but the one I graduated with was history. The through line there is all these past lives. I would feel it. I would almost time travel. And so then I learned, like, studied that. Very drawn to the Middle Ages, very drawn to, I wrote a paper on witch trials in 5th grade for this gifted class. I was the only one in my grade school wrote a paper. It went to state, the whole night. Why the witch trials? What, my 5th grade self, what was attracted to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the through line here is this history, watching these big patterns. And right now we're in something called the fourth turning. So I think he's a sociologist and economist. They wrote a book in the 70s about the 80-year cycle of civilization. Every civilization has an 80-year cycle, give or take 5 years. And it's 20-year generations. And every 20 years, you switch, almost like the seasons, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Every 80 years, we have a war, and boundaries potentially will shift, and all of the systems get wiped and reset, because you've got, so they reset this next generation, they tweak them, then they start to fix them. So Obama, when he was in office, was fixing things. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's destruction. We're in a fourth turning right now. 2020 is a fourth turning. So if from the beginning of the country, you got the revolution, 80 years from when we first started settling with the Revolutionary War. 80 years after that is a Civil War. Then we come to World War II, 2020, 1940 to 2020. We're right now where everything is resetting, which is good. And there is physical war going on in the world right now. And for the first time ever, the whole Northern Hemisphere is on a fourth turning, because the World War II shifted, unnaturally shifted all the whole Northern Hemisphere into the same cycle. So we're all within like 5 years of a fourth turning, which,
If I was an emoji right now, it would be the head being blown, just so
right,
you know.
right.
Yeah.
So look what we had. I was thinking aliens, I'll be honest, but I was expecting something that would unite the world. It happened to be a pandemic, which probably was more logical than aliens, but my mind went to aliens, so that is what's shifting everything right now. We had a global thing that united us and is drawing us apart at the same time, getting us
Yep.
all to re-examine everything. And we'll see. They were predicting, when I heard an interview with them after 9/11, and why we didn't go to full out war after that, it's because it was a third turning response, like the Lusitania was in World War I. It was a third turning response. We didn't jump right in and totally change everything and try and change borders. We tried to fix things. So now we're at 2020 and what they said after 9/11, they said, well, probably it will be, it won't deal with countries. It will be more like these pockets we see, and it'll probably be internet based. The next war will be on the internet, where we're taking down people's cell phone or computer or Wi-Fi in different countries as warfare, or germs or whatever, not missiles, which is probably good. I don't, war isn't good, who knows. Anyway, so that being said, we're in the middle of this fourth turning, and on top of that, we've got all this other woo stuff, you know, Age of Aquarius, all this other huge woo stuff going on at the same time. So now we've got to raise kids who can handle this huge change. In the next 3 years, we will go through more change in the next 3 years than we've seen in the last 120, I think they were saying. If you think where we were at 1900 to now, we will see more definite change between now and 2025. Isn't that crazy? It's just the bell curve. It's just like, whew. So we're preparing kids for a lot of change. We are preparing kids in a world where we're essentially at war, or it's not all idealistic. Think of the 50s, that's first turning, right? Where they're creating an idealistic world. We're more in a war type world where, you know, like, we have to ration our food to a certain extent, and we can't always get the parts we need for the house. And
baby formula.
Yeah, baby formula. This is what I'm talking about. So we're kind of in a war type situation where, you know, the school shooting, sorry, I brought it up, but we're in a war type situation where we're teaching our kids different skills. To me, bring them home, just bring them home, bring them home, bring them home, keep them focused on the love and light and exploration and curiosity and teaching themselves. One of my philosophies was, if they love to learn and they love to read, by the time they get old enough or they go to college or whatever, they'll know how to figure out whatever it is that I miss teaching them.
Right.
And they'll be willing to go learn it somewhere, either to a book, a course, whatever. And that, I think, is even more important right now. Like, get them off the phones. There's so much damage is going on with the phones. It changes my personality, and I know it.
Me too. Yep.
And it's more addictive than these drugs out there that heroin, cocaine, it's more addictive than that. And specifically social media. It's all nice they got a computer in their pocket. We don't have to memorize things anymore. We can go look in our phone. When I was in history, we had to memorize all sorts of shit.
Yep.
And now it's like, I don't need to know how many countries there are in Africa right now. I can go Google it and know immediately. I just need to know what to Google. That's what we have to teach them. What do they have to go search for? How can you put the patterns together? So keeping them at home right now makes a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to raising kids, what I noticed, my kids are 10 years apart between my oldest and my youngest. My oldest, I wanted to make things perfect for her. I wanted her to be in the best classes. I wanted her to learn the best things. I wanted to give her the best life had to offer. By the last one, I wanted him to find out what his best life was. And that was the difference. And in the middle there is when I read that Covey book. And listen. So when things shifted for us is when I sat down and listened to the kids. Well, what do you want to learn? Do you want to go to school? Okay, if you want to go to school, why? My middle one, she wanted to be in cheerleading and go to prom. I wasn't only thrilled about that, but if that's the only reason you want to go to school, okay, how else can we do that? So she was a flyer in the park district and went to big competitions as was a cheerleader. Great. By the time she needed to be in skating more, she was done with her cheerleading need, and it would have been one or the other if she were in high school. And different muscle development. She skated 20 hours a week with off-ice training. She was a serious skater. She skated with Evan Lysacek. She had the same choreographer. So she was a serious skater. And so she wasn't allowed to swim except for one day a week because it would change her muscle tone. At cheerleading, they would have pulled her at some point because it would have changed the muscle development. So we got it out of her system. Unfortunately, she was 6 feet tall, which had problems with the skating, but it also prevented her from getting a prom date. So she went to dances in high school, you know, and that might have happened if she'd gone to a school anyway. But she went as a solo person to a prom, for a homeschooling prom with a bunch of girls, and had a good time. And then she met this amazing boy in college, and they went to a bunch of dances in college, and she just recreated it, and it all worked. So why do they want to go to school? Ask them. Is it something, you know, will they miss their friends? Great. Well, wouldn't you rather have regular play dates with your friends? Like, wouldn't your friends' parents like the daycare? So offer the regular play dates every week so they can see their friends without it being in all the stuff going on at school. They'll probably like that better anyway.
Yeah.
You know, maybe one of the moms will switch homeschooling with you. Like that would be even cooler than going to school. So there are options. Why do they want to go to school if they want to go to school? If they
Right.
really like learning in that environment, and some kids thrive in that. That's a different
Different.
situation.
Absolutely different.
So I would say listen to them. There was this whole thing. I taught a homeschooling course like 10 years ago. And one of the exercises I had them do right away, it's like, well, figure out, talk to your kids. How do they like to learn? Do they need to be alone, or do they want to be with a group? Do they need music on, or do they need it silent? Are they better in the morning, the afternoon, or the evening? Do they do better all in one shot or in little clusters? Are they better studying one subject for a week and then switching to another subject, or a bunch of little stuff, or one subject a day and do each one has a different learning style? And the one I love the most is when there's this thing where you can see where they pick up information the best. So you talk to them in back, front, top, side. Which one do they hear it the best? And you say something and say which one, it'll be louder in one of them. And I knew this for me because the phone, I always talked on the phone this side. I didn't understand why there was a difference, but it's because I take things in here. So if I leave one earphone in, it's always this one. But when soon as you find that out, you've got one side. If your kid goes, this is my dominant space, when you teach, always sit on that side and always put the annoying sibling on the other side, because they won't hear that annoying sibling.
Yeah.
And there's like things that you can do to really know your kids, but more importantly, you're teaching them to listen to their bodies. Talking about a heart-centered life, we're being taught by society to be in our head all the time. School was created because we needed to create an industrial revolution workforce.
Yep.
That's where school came from. So these kids learn to listen to a bell, work 9 to 5, go to the factories, do their job. They learn to listen. They go to the bathroom when they're told to go to the bathroom. When we homeschool, when are you hungry? When do you want to get up? When do you need to go to the bathroom? How do you, if you're having problems, I would get caught up in, I'm human, and went to a grade school myself. As soon as I started pushing things and the kids started getting squirrely and annoying and fight me on stuff, I knew something was wrong. We go on a field trip, or we go on a trip or something like that, reset stuff, come home and say, okay, what did you love about, what do you want to learn? What did you love about what we were doing before? And start bringing that back in and get them to want to do it. One of my kids would not do spelling for 3 years. And then in 2 weeks, she skipped 4 grade levels. So that was my proof that if I let it be enough, it would work. I just had to let it be until they were ready. And then my job was, I call myself the cruise director. Someone said they were into supercars. It was a matter of getting them enough information on supercars. Granted, this was pre-computer. Getting them enough information from the library on supercars, laying it around the house, taking them to go out and look, where do they all live? Let's go look for supercars. If we were heading somewhere and we passed stuff.
How would you deal? I know that your kids didn't have the phones and computers, but how would you as a parent deal with that now? Because it's a big struggle. I'm involved very much so with the Waldorf community and homeschooling, and devices we're always talking about. Some love them and some don't. And we're, as parents, we're trying to find this balance. Nowadays, what would you do? Like if you were doing it now with these cell phones, what would you do?
I am so grateful that these came in. Like our first computer was when my oldest was in high school, and it was dial up. I'm so grateful I didn't have to deal with some of this stuff. Now my youngest, he got an iPhone, the first iPhone, when he was like 16 or 15. And I was grateful for the navigation that was on there, but all of a sudden that's when I saw his personality change and the addiction happen. And then I got one and I saw it happen with me too. And I'm like, I'm not liking this. This is interesting, but I don't quite know what to do about it. So that being said, I think I would keep them off of stuff as long as I possibly could.
Yeah.
I noticed with my youngest, who's the only boy, that commercials and violent TV shows changed his behavior when it came to how he interacted with his sisters. So we got a TiVo, and he was not allowed to watch commercials, and he was only allowed to watch TV shows I put on the TiVo. So no more Power Rangers, because as soon as he watched Power Rangers, he was fighting with his sisters, even though it was fun. Like we didn't need, you want to go wrestle with somebody, you got to find a boy, not a girl who's going to cry. Yeah. So, limiting that to a certain extent. And I don't want to shelter them. And yet I don't want them to getting shot in school either. So there's that, and I don't want them seeing some of the stuff that I hear. My sister-in-law and one of my kids are both teachers, and the stuff that I hear that are going on in these schools right now, porn, shared things between classrooms, not being able to get their attention. You can't take their phones away. Inability to pay attention. The bullying, it seems it's really gotten out of control with the pandemic too. Let's throw that in there. I mean, obviously that's messed with stuff.
Yep.
So keeping them home, getting them interested. What do they love? Get them to engage with their heart. Get them to engage with their soul. Get them to feel their full body. Like the biggest thing I would do get off the phone and limit it, I'll finish this and I'll go back to answering the question. Get them engaged with their full body. Get them to be aware of everything, get them into embodiment. Well, what does your heart tell you to do? Do you have a gut instinct on this? Are you feeling pain in your body? Well, that pain is a message to your brain that something's wrong. So what is that saying to you? And they can pick it up a lot faster than we can. I mean, it takes us a while. We were told to stay in our head and stay thinking. Get into even with the boys, get into your body, if your body says it hurts, is it a good hurt or a bad hurt when it comes to athlete, athletics? What's the point? My daughter would skate through her kneecap going out of place and pop it back in while she was on the ice. We probably should not have let that go on at all. She's in her 30s and she's having knee problems because of this, but they were teaching her skate through the pain. Is that worth it? And get them to make the choice if it's worth it. She made that choice that she wanted to stay.
Yeah.
And finally I pulled her because I knew the permanent damage was starting to get to be too much. And she was 16, so she was aging out of being able to get anywhere anyway, and she was too tall. So
you get your son involved with Tony Robbins? Was that something that he asked for, or was that you as a parent helping him with life coaching?
So in 2011, we started Tony Robbins and we started doing all of it, and we kept talking about it and all this other stuff. And they had a teen program, and we demanded, but he didn't say no. He didn't flat out say no. So he went to the next UPW in Chicago, won a scholarship. He always said common sense was a superpower. And realistically, yes, I think he had great common sense. He's an amazing kid, but part of it wasn't taught out of him, right? So he shows up and he has great charisma. So he showed up there, won Gills, which is their summer camp, and then went to the summer camp, from there. And he did other things too. He went people to people. He went to Australia. He also went to Antarctica because his sister went. And what a better way to get a year worth of science.
That is like my dream world, to be able to teach my children and be able to travel the world at the same time. That to me is like the enchanted life. Like that right there is everything that I would love to get. Like one of my dreams is to have a big RV and drive the kids down to Mount Rushmore and all around and teach them history that way. So I'm working on manifesting it with your help. So
okay, so get this. This is how we did American history. With the older two, we started at Jamestown and went up. And did the whole thing going up. And then the older one. And then the younger two, we started at the top. We started at where the Pilgrims.
Massachusetts.
Plymouth Rock. Started at Plymouth Rock and went our way down. And we had a car with a TV in the back, where you put the disc in and whatever. And so they would watch historical movies on the way. We did ghost tours at night because they would talk about the legends of the area. And then, because what are you going to do with kids in a hotel room every night for 3 weeks, right? So we went on the ghost tours, and then they would get all excited about this stuff. And the next day they would learn the history because they wanted to hear behind the ghost stories. What was going on behind that made these things all happen? And we just had fun. And then when they were in high school, they would have to read a book and write a report. And then they were done with American history. We were just done.
Oh my gosh.
It was just so fun. It was just so fun.
Now I want to interject because something you mentioned before, I want to get back to. In history, you said that you were learning history through your past lives. And here you're teaching your kids on these ghost trails. Super cool. But I know that you also, because I'm taking your class coming up soon on Akashic Records, I am very excited about this. But I really want you to talk a little bit about past lives and Akashic Records, because I already took one workshop with Julie and it was amazing. I accessed the Akash, my first time working with her, and I'm looking forward to a longer class coming up, but teach us, tell us.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know anything about the Akashic Records,
Mhm.
it is essentially the memory of the energy field. So energy comes in frequencies and it doesn't disappear and nothing new is created, right? So every thought is an energetic thing. Our bodies are all energy, right? We're all cells and molecules and all this stuff, and that's all moving. This is just a collection of them that creates something hard. Everything around us is actually just moving energy. So there's a memory of everything that's been thought, everything that's been said, every big event, everything that has ever happened in the energy field. There is a memory bank of this stuff. Edgar Cayce made it popular, and by calling it a library. There was someone, I can't remember her name, there's someone before that who used the word Akasha. So it became the Akashic Record Library that you would go into to put a human construct so we could create a structure in our mind so we could understand it in our human form.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can do, and it's our birthright to access this, it's just really connecting with and talking to our soul and having a way to do it. And it's getting easier. The way the veil is getting thinner and thinner and thinner right now with everything that's going on, it's so much easier to access it. It's in 8 of the major religious texts. They talk about this record in the, depending on which text it is out there, right? There's a record of everything. So this isn't a new concept. This has always been around. We're just being able to get into it a lot easier. And basically you just go in and you can see your guide, because each one of us has our own guide, and go in there and you can access questions about anything your soul knows. The key thing is everything that's happening in our lives is happening for us, not to us. And when I jumped off that cliff, that was what I realized. Everything is happening for me, and it's a matter of trusting. When I jumped, that was the decision I made. I decided to trust. If I trust, then everything I am seeing, everything I'm experiencing is happening for me. This is a good thing.
Yep.
This is something wrong with me. And that was the decision I had to make. And that's the decision your kids need to make. There's nothing wrong with them. They're exactly who they're supposed to be. And if their teachers don't like the fact that they can't follow their rules, well, then that's not for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that there's something wrong with your kid. And that's back to that question, that's what really matters. Your kids need to know, what would I teach them now? What would I do with phones? Get them away from anything that thinks that there's something wrong with them. No TikTok. Absolutely. What is up with TikTok? No TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Really limit that down. Like the social media breaks my heart. It's just and there's so many good that my daughter's friends with all the people she went to Antarctica with because of Facebook. And yet I don't know if I'd let my kids be on there right now. So limit that. Social media put that off as long as possible.
Yes.
You can create a life where they don't want it, go for it. Having a computer in their pocket where they can Google things, if you can put limits on that where they don't end up with porn, do it. That's cool. But what else can they find on there? So, okay, back to the Akash. We have a connection to everything in our soul. We can ask, well, why is this happening to us? Before we're born, we make decisions about what lessons we're going to learn in this life. And some of them we make pretty hard on ourselves. And sometimes we're the bad guys for other people and to create the challenges for other people. And sometimes the alcoholic father that you run into periodically, what if that soul made that decision and he was your lover in so many other lives? What if he came back as your alcoholic father who abused you so you could learn a lesson? So you could learn how to say no, so you could learn to stand up for yourself. And it's actually a soul that loves you super deeply and didn't want to do this, but is actually sacrificed to do this for you. Now, I'm not trying to make any of this okay. That's not what I'm trying to do. If there's a human being who's doing that shit in your life, that's wrong. And how do you become empowered? But what if it is, what's the gift we get to take from this? What if you
That's
did?
it. What's the gift we can take from this? Yeah.
What if we decided to go through this so we could grow? And that's the key. Once you sit in that for a minute, okay, what if this is a gift? How can I take a deep breath? Now I'm having all these human emotions. How can I just sink into this and find the gift in this? How can I grow and help others? What is the purpose? What is the meaning? Be it with the Akashic Records and some of the things you can find out, you can ask. You can go into your past lives. You can see the lines of the future. I want to know what in this next set in my life of different things is for my highest good and what's going to make my life more difficult. And in the Akashic Records, I can see that. And I've been doing it for a long time.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things I want to guide all of my students to be able to do. And so we can
Always
talk.
constantly asking, what should I do? What should I do? And we're asking other people. And the beauty of what you're saying is that Akash is giving us the gift of asking our higher self, not
Exactly.
other people with their stories and their dramas and their backdrops. Every time I've ever listened to someone else in my life, like on really important things, and I've taken their advice, it was not right. So I love the fact that Akashic records and being able to access them is like talking to your higher self to find out what is the right choice for me. What am I supposed to learn from this? Because forgiving is hard.
It is.
Forgiving is so hard. But if you can talk to your higher self and kind of get some perspective of that everything's okay and it's okay because of this, that's a gift. I know that when I did that workshop with you, it was really beautiful. And I like how you use that library set, but it was almost like modern day with, kind of tapping into a computer. So it felt natural. Like it didn't feel like some woo-woo thing that didn't make sense. It just felt like a guided meditation. And,
Mhm.
I love working with you because when you work with someone from a life coach perspective, I love how, first of all, we laugh, which I love. Thank you. But also that it's just kind of talking, and because you have this homeschool background of looking at people and figuring it out, it always feels very natural to figure out, well, what's really happening? Why are you feeling like this? Or, what's really stopping you, Paige, from manifesting an L-shaped sofa? Why is it taking you, all of this to get there? And
Isn't
so
really the L-shaped sofa. It's all this other stuff. Yeah.
exactly. How are people able to get in touch with you right now? I know that you got hacked recently, which is a big bummer. So I know you have a couple different profiles out there. Can you help people find the right account for you?
Yes. Okay. So yeah, well, the universe has been telling me since the beginning of the year I need to start over and clean the slate. So that's what I'm doing. So my new Instagram, don't think that I think that there's only like 50 followers right now. And yes, it really is me. It's the.enchanted life. So, and then it'll say Juli Gauthier under there. You can message me there. There are links to some of my things there as well in my link tree. You can email me at julie@juligauthier.com. That's Julie without an E. So JULI@JULIGAUTHIER.com. You can email me there. I think we're linked on Facebook. One of my issues is I'm having issues with my Facebook. So if it takes me a bit to get back, I can't always get in and access everything. So, but you can definitely message me there. And I have a business page, Juli Gauthier business page, but I haven't been able to update it as much, like I said, because it's all wonky on me.
You're
Those
rebirthing.
I know. I know.
We all do, though. And I think a lot of times people think that you get this certain level of success and you just stop. And I think that that's so counterintuitive, because we've got to be able to keep evolving and keep growing. And I love how you start as a homeschool mom, and then you've got this great homeschool business and life coach, and then, spiritual life coach business. And it's like all different phases of you. And every time it's like you're getting bigger and better. So I can't wait to see what's coming from you. And I really recommend anybody who's watching this, if you're homeschool mom, reach out to Juli. If you are learning about your spiritual awakening, reach out to Juli. If you are an artist, I know that you have a background too, which I want to touch on just because I have a theater background. Blew my mind the other day. We're just having this casual conversation, and Juli just kind of slips in there that she used to be a costumer. And so another connection there. So if you're a costumer or an artist, reach out to Juli. Seriously, you check all my boxes for like people I vibe with. I love it. Now, the Akashic Records, is it like an in-person class, or can you do it via Zoom?
It's via Zoom, and you can do it through recordings. The way we're going to do it is basically each of this first level, we'll go into 6 meditations, and I'll take you in, and each time we'll investigate a different element, and I'll introduce you to doing readings with other people. But that'll be the second level. Like we'll go into like getting you to a point where you can start doing it as services in the second level. So this first one is perfect because you get a taste of everything. You can go in and check out your soulmates. You can go in and your soul decisions, your past lives, your future elements, meet your library, all these different aspects. Each week we'll go in and I'll explore each one of those just so you can kind of see what all is in there. And it takes time. While it's your birthright, I bet you when you first started riding a bike, it was wobbly if you couldn't stay up at all. So now because you do all this other work, it was easy for you to get in the first time. But that doesn't mean everyone will the first time. And that's why we're doing 6 weeks of this, and you can repeat it and it'll be recording. So if you can't even show up, it'll be Wednesdays, 11 o'clock Central. If you can't even do it live, that'll be fine, because then you can just do the meditations at home and then meet us when we do group things. We'll create some group for those who can't show up during the day. And it starts this Wednesday. And if anybody's listening to this, if you message me, I'll give you $222 off. So that is my offer for you guys. And I'll throw in the free Voxer too, which means 24/7 for the 7 weeks. You can talk to me. If you're doing it on your own and you have questions, okay, I saw this, but I saw a color and that's it. What does this mean? You know, and you want to talk to me about whatever you're doing on your own or how it's incorporating into your regular life, I'm there for you on Voxer. So that
what a gift. And another thing I'm feeling guided to mention too, I'm hearing, I have no idea what this woo-woo Akashic stuff is. And some people are going, nope, not for me. And I just want to address that for a second. Even if this is woo-woo and completely new to you, if there's a part of you that's saying yes somewhere, or that you're like weirdly interested, I want to challenge you. If you're weirdly interested in something that's way off the radar for you, chances are it's exactly where you should be. It's going to connect a dot from one part of who you are to the next phase of who you're becoming. And I'm saying this because I've experienced that so many times, where I think if it's not an exact fit, or, you know, if everything's not exactly perfect, I just won't do it. But I feel like some people that are watching right now or in the replay are kind of weirdly curious. That's the feeling that I'm getting. And if that's you, then follow up on it and take the, like Julie did with the workshop, take that jump off the cliff. Trust there's something out there for you in this. I love you, Julie. I am so thrilled that the universe connected the dots for me to meet you. You have been a huge mentor. I love you so much. You've been such an important part of my life, and so many big shifts since I've met you. And I want the enchanted life. And you have so many beautiful stories that I look at and I listen and I go, yes. And so as we're all creating and hoping for and dreaming of an enchanted life, let's all just take a second and breathe in how it would feel to have that enchanted life. All those things we put in the dream book that we want, that we think aren't impossible. There are ways to do it if we can trust, if we can jump off the cliff. And thank you so much for being in my life. Thank you so much for being a mentor and a coach to me. You've helped me in so many ways. I love you so, so, so much. And to anyone who's watching this woman, work with her, really. She's wonderful. She's great. And there's so many new things that we are becoming right now in this new wonderful world. So we only have a couple seconds, minutes left, but I would love to ask if you have one little bit of advice for my listeners of how they can use their heart as a compass, of how they can create an enchanted life. What would it be?
Relax, trust, and know everything is happening for you and not to you. And then just get into, why is this happening for me? Why is this a good thing? If you can do that in any given moment with anything that's going on, you'll shift your life right away. And then take chances. That would be the other one. If it feels outside your comfort zone, go for it, because that's where all the fun is outside your comfort zone.
Beautiful. why is this happening for me, right? What is a good way to change those big ups and downs in life, to just search for that. I love that. So if anyone is, I'm going to post all the links to get in touch with you in this. If you are having any problems or not sure, reach out to me. I'll get you connected with Julie. And your class starts on Wednesday, you said?
This Wednesday, yes.
All right. Well, if you want to take advantage of it, do now. That's a really great deal that we have here in this class. I feel very honored that she dropped that for us here. And thank you so much for listening. Our guest next week is going to be a woman that I just met at a psychic fair. Her name is Susie Morrell, and she made her own tarot card deck. And so she's an artist and a psychic medium. And so we're going to learn a little bit about her life as an artist and a healer. So check back on Monday next week at 11 a.m. for our next Heart as a Compass radio and interview series. My special thanks and gratitude to you, Julie. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you
I hope
so much for having
everyone
me.
gets to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.